Good evening and welcome back, everyone, to FractalU.com. As you know, I am Dan Winter with FractalField.com, and we, as usual, have another very exciting presentation for you tonight with Tufan Guven, who really leads this work in sacred geometry and fractal studies in Turkey, and who is also sponsoring a conference in Turkey upcoming on sacred geometry and the Islamic tradition and physics of implosion and alchemy and all the cool stuff. And Tufan and I were just discussing his very interesting work with a measurement technology, which he's going to tell you about, where they use electronic acupuncture to measure some of these responses on the body. But Tufan has prepared amazing visuals in his slideshow for us tonight, as he did last year. Tufan is one of our most popular speakers because he, perhaps unlike me, makes this understandable to the average person. No, it's true that we have so many requests that, you know, well, yes, we have the deep physics, but do you have a presentation that the average person and particularly young people can understand in simple terms with great visuals? And Tufan has been a wonderful service in that regard and has really prepared a great way of presenting these materials in a very gentle, fun, visual, and understandable way, and we thank Tufan for that. Also, we should mention Tufan mentioned to me in our fun conversations when he was with us at our last conference here in South France that was it your father, your grandfather, your ancestors there?
Grandfather.
Your grandfather. Your grandfather was actually involved in teaching some of the sacred geometry stuff. Is that right, Tufan? Or?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And so we realized it all in a rush that really part of our sort of spiritual mission here was to help put these things together, where we look at the deep, beautiful spiritual science and spiritual physics that perfectly underlies both Eastern and Western religions in such a way as to beautifully unify these religions to a pure principle that is beyond religion war and the need for conflict, to a perfect depicting the Arab letter sequences on their mosque walls so beautifully in those artistic paintings. And we later, did the 3D modeling to prove that those tilt angles of the Arabic letters were literally shadows of the golden spiral on a torus indexed by symmetry, which is how you tilt charge domains, which is how science knows how to create matter out of light, literally the atomic table. And the same exact is true of the Hebrew alphabet that we saw, golden mean.info/DNA ring, that if you put the self-organizing golden mean spiral on the self-organizing torus and look at the shadows in the self-organizing 7 spins of the tetra symmetry axes, you see the shadows which are the Hebrew alphabet, namely an index to create charge symmetry domains. And then in a more advanced conversation about those things, we've talked at length with Teresa Burns and Alan about the physics and science behind Ophanim Enochian magic and the angel science. Incidentally, so many more physicists today believe in angels since they've been studying the plasma physics shape of the universes. And the way angels communicate is clear, as John Dee studied at such great length, as Vincent Bridges and now Teresa Burns and I have been teaching at goldenmean.info/Ophanim, that angels communicate by throwing magnetic donuts back and forth in a sequence of symmetries, and their alphabet is their language, is their charge, is their beingness. And so painting all these things on the walls of cathedrals and mosques is a way of representing the sequence of charge domain symmetries that create centripetal force, negentropy, and spiritual enlightenment, literally bliss. Another example, Teresa has been reviewing our work with Vincent Bridges and others about what's called the green language, that Fulcanelli and others observed this sequence of alphabet letters carved literally in sequence on the Gothic cathedral walls to steer charge magnetic domains in the correct angle to create charge implosion at the center. Charge implosion being literally what it is to cast a spell, charge implosion being literally what it is to make alchemy, which is to say, to get isotope transitions happening, literally nuclear transmutation, what you need is to get charge to non-destructively collapse between valence electron shells. So the physics of alchemy, as in perfected fusion, is again about this centripetal force. And in fact, the theme of alchemy is recurrent through the upcoming gatherings this year. Fractalfield.com/2018, first event in Prague, mid-May, and then at the end of May into early June is Tufan's amazing conference series there in Turkey, and the climax event here is in South France, beginning June 8. And alchemy is the theme of all those events, among other things, and Paul Harris will be involved in all of them as well, who has perhaps a world leader in teaching practical hands-on alchemy. And so where the theme of alchemy again then connects this East versus West religion, which is literally plasma fusion. And there's a direct connection between plasma fusion and alchemy being transmutation, which even Jean-Paul Biberian spoke about briefly last week in the physics of cold fusion presentation, namely transmutations. The example that is so outstanding in mind here is that when Vincent told the story of the Muslims doing their, is it clockwise or counterclockwise, walk around the Kaaba stone? I think it's counterclockwise.
I think it's counterclockwise. Yeah.
It is counterclockwise. But if we now know what the Kaaba stone is, the glass meteorite, literally Lucifer's eye, which was formed by foaming platinum group metals, gold, through the glass, like the Templars, made the Gothic cathedral deep red windows, making it a phase conjugate implosive dielectric. And then later they ground up, as Vincent documented historically, that Kaaba stone, half of it disappeared when the mad caliph allowed the alchemist to grind it up to make the philosopher's stone, the projective powder, which was an implosive capacitance, which was then planted like a grain of rice in the molten red-hot mercury, and the transmutation to gold would happen under the correct long-wave phonon conditions, and the gold that John Dee and Kelly made that way was the purest documented in history ever measured by the British Royal Society, the most advanced science on the planet in the day of John Dee and Kelly. So alchemy is not just a metaphor. It is charge implosion, it is isotope transition, and it's real. And it's very significant that the material of the philosopher's stone, the so-called Kaaba stone, is not the charge implosion, the catalyst for that non-destructive charge collapse, isotope transition, alchemy. It is also the key to the centripetal charge at the center of a massive centripetal bliss ritual, the fusion of a large number of people into one charge, embedding experience, the soul's eye. And so the physics of alchemy, again, is a precise bridge between, again, the physics and the spiritual traditions. So all of these things say once we understand the spiritual science and history of these things, we no longer need to fight about it. Instead, we can simply agree on what we can agree on the answer to Kurt Vonnegut's favorite question, sitting at the bar getting drunk with whiskey in the morning in his book, The Breakfast of Champions. The question was, what are people for? And if an entire planet could agree on the answer to that question, one would have to believe that there would not be any more need for war because we could make all decisions based on an agreement of what are people for. In other words, yes, to make your aura large enough to be immortal, to become plasma projected, to go through the heart of the sun, to teach your children how to have bliss. Yes, we could know what people are for. So that kind of agreement is what is behind our intention to teach sacred geometry in Islamic tradition and the physics of implosion with Tufan Guven today. And I'm delighted to say that Terry Burns has joined us here and is saying thumbs up. And just before I close this intro to Tufan's talk, I want to say that, so next week, I am going to do a sharing about turning all of this conversation into practical hygiene for the practices which enable bliss and a big aura, all the way from diet to architecture to movement and just the practices. And then the following week, we had scheduled Alan Green, but instead, since Alan had a medical appointment, that Terry Burns is coming back with us, has prepared an amazing curriculum, and you're going to hear more about that shortly. That'll be May 6th. So Terry will be back with us with more on this plasma projection and sacred alphabets and alchemy. So more to come on that. Okay, so on that note, I really want to thank Tufan Guven for coming and preparing this amazing presentation and his wonderful visuals. And I turn it over to you, Tufan. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dan. I am very delighted to be here once again and to be sharing this with you all. I really enjoy seeing this Fractal University program expanding more and more every year, and being a part of it is an honor. So first, a little bit about myself. My background is in hedge fund management, currently a biophoton therapist working with biofeedback, solutions for hormonal problems, chronic inflammation, toxins, and heavy metals, organ functional problems. Also, I give lectures on subjects like holographic universe, fractal fields, light technologies, golden ratio perfected applications, and I also organize events. Next one being the Smyrna Alchemical Reunion and Sacred Geometry Conference in Izmir, Turkey. This is going to be a 5-day conference starting on the 31st of May. So our speaker list includes Dan Winter, Paul Harris, Terry Burns, Ellen Moore, Ron Laplace, Atta Niron, and myself. And there will be sightseeings and rituals in esoteric locations at the ancient Greek city of Ephesus. So we'll have a lot of fun. So tonight's presentation is about sacred geometry in Islamic tradition and the physics of implosion. So as we did last time, I'll start with some basic descriptions, and then we will go into deeper science.
Great. Tufan, I'm putting the links in. I put the link to the 2018 event, and I put your link in there, alchemicalreunion.com in the
Great,
chat
thank
window.
you. All right. So, okay, this is also working. So I want to start with a quotation from Plato. He said, "Geometry will draw the soul towards truth and create the spirit of philosophy." So this is a profound quotation. And when I had my geometry class in my school, nobody taught me that geometry would draw the soul towards the truth or it would create the spirit of philosophy. So one might ask if there is any exaggeration here, or if this is an overstatement or not. So by the end of this presentation, I'm hoping that we will be able to find an answer to this question. But when we look at the history of geometry, we see that geometry has been very important for many influential people, and one being Atatürk, who is behind me this way. This one is a painting from my wife. And well, Atatürk was very much into geometry, and he had a huge library. He read thousands of books in his lifetime. And he also, we know that he read Plato's books and some other philosophers. And he wrote a book on geometry and also translated all the technical terms into the new Turkish language himself.
I'm sorry, who are you talking about? I missed the name, sorry.
This is Atatürk. He is the founder of the Turkish Republic in 19...
Oh, Atatürk. Ah, yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Atatürk. He is also considered to be the greatest leader of the 20th century. And I was just saying that he was also very much into geometry, and he wrote a book on geometry and translated all the technical terms into the new Turkish language himself. So he had great interest in geometry, and he had projects like designing fractal villages, one being the project of the Republican Village. It's Cumhuriyet Köyü project in Turkish, which later influenced Jack Fresco, the Venus project. It's like concentric circles. But
the Fractal Village is wonderful.
Yeah. The subject of geometry was also used by many secret societies like Masonry and others. We can see this in their symbolism, in their logos, and a lot of esoteric traditions were using geometry. So it's clear that geometry has been a core understanding in many disciplines, basically. And I would like to rediscover with you all why this has been the core understanding, and may try to understand and expand our consciousness on this level. And so I'm going to continue with some basic definitions like fractality. So a fractal is a geometric pattern that is repeated at every scale. It's coming from the Latin fractus, which is broken and fracture. So the term fractal was first used by mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot to extend the concept of theoretical fractional dimensions to geometric patterns in nature in 1975. And this picture at the back is his famous Mandelbrot set. So the qualities of a fractal is self-similarity and repetition. And we can also play with words like self-embedding scale invariant. And we see these in nature, in plant life, in many different places. This is one of the examples that I like giving. This is a cauliflower.
Yes, even perfect entanglement, self-embedding.
Yes, definitely. Now, when we look at the cauliflower, we see this basic cone shape, like a vortex. And it repeats itself in different scales. So it's like a perfect fractal plant.
And perhaps even a 3D fractal.
That's right. And some other examples from plant life. Beautiful flowers.
Beautiful.
Well, we see it on the rivers, on mountains. These are dendritic forms. And we see them in architecture. So this was something that was used in architecture extensively during the ancient times. For example, when we look at this A model here, now they took this model and shrinked it on a smaller scale and put it around, and they did the same thing on as a third layout here and created a fractal design. And we see more of these examples in African architecture. This one is in Cameroon. These are hexagonal fractal settlements. Ron Eglash has a great documentary on fractal architectures focused on Africa. He spent a great deal of time there, and he presented them so well. Like here again, we see this basic model here, which is taken, shrinked, and applied in smaller scales, and same procedure repeated here again. And later tonight, we will discuss why the shaman of the settlement was located right at the center of this fractal settlement. And when we look at the evolution of Islamic geometrical patterns, we can see that I'm going to zoom in here for a second just to show you the timeline here. Now this is between 600 and 1800s. So these are the first geometries that were produced by the Abbasi Caliphate. So this is the early stage, the invention of interlaced geometrical patterns. And then here we see a different set, which is a little bit more complex. This was created during the Seljuks. And this is the first artistic movement, introduction of abstract and non-constructible geometrical patterns. And we also see a phi-based geometrical pattern here with a 10-pointed star. And here these, did I zoom out enough? And these three geometries are much more complex than before. These were developed by the Ottoman period, through the Ottoman period, and this is the late stage, second artistic movement, introduction of highly detailed geometrical patterns. So we can, in a nutshell, divide these geometries in three groups. The first group is a six-pointed hexagonal geometries, and the second group based on 8-point octagonal eightfold rosette, and the third group is 10-point decagon, a 10-point star or tenfold rosetta. So we will be seeing some examples of these now. This research was done in Malaysia, in the University of Technology. Okay, this one is an example from the first development. I'll go back for a second. Here, you see, these were the first examples of the geometrical patterns in the Islamic architecture, and I just wanted to put that in our presentation. Now, this one is in Tunisia. This is the Great Mosque of Cairo, and we can see these patterns. Well, they very much resemble four-way mixing in electrical engineering. Dan would like it probably.
Yes, just to say that the way lasers approach each other, perfect approaching pine cones kissing noses, four-way mixing.
Right.
For phase conjugation.
Yes. And so to me, these symbols very much resemble the symmetry operations. In the context of molecular symmetry, a symmetry operation is a permutation of atoms such that the molecule or crystal is transformed into a state indistinguishable from the starting state. So physical properties must be invariant with respect to symmetry operations. The interesting thing is that when I look at these geometries, I notice a commonality, and they all share a specific quality. I want to give you a couple of seconds to meditate on these geometries, and if you want to, if you notice something interesting, a commonality, please feel free to write it down to the chat box, and then we'll take it from there. That's true, Terry. That's right.
Tufan, is your webcam showing on your screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, we lost it here, but it's okay as long as you're up there. Go ahead.
Okay. So, okay, the commonality that I just said that there's a commonality among those geometries. They all share a specific quality, and I wanted to ask the audience if they can find a commonality that they noticed, and they should note that down here on the chat box if they see any commonality among all these geometries. So
I see a lot of 4 and 8-fold symmetry, some 6, and no 5-fold symmetry. Is that right?
For me, they all share a center point. So there are different geometries, different perspectives, different colors, but each one of them have a center point. Everything revolves around the center. So for me, finding the center point or going to the center is profound in this way.
Good point.
So yeah, I think that this is a very beautiful way of expressing the way to the center point artistically. The implication of the center point is very instructive in understanding the gravity, life force, perception, bliss experience, successful birth and death, and symbolism and alchemy. I personally think that symbolism in Islamic architecture express the understanding of these fundamental concepts that constitute our reality. So when we talk about finding the center point, we can also think about the implosion, the gravitational force that holds the fields together. And from here, we would also need to explore the connection of geometry and the wave mechanics in the context of charge implosion. So this is where we are going from here. The etymological meaning of alchemy, English from Old French, from medieval Latin, from Arabic, as far as we can track back, was alchem. Later, chem became words like chemistry and shamanism. So in ancient Egypt, chem originally meant black, or the black soil of the Nile Valley. Or a more profound way of describing it would be access to black hole.
That's beautiful. That's what we've been saying, and that whatever created that centripetal force is that which creates not just fusion and oneness and implosion, but the spiritual experience and bliss and the negentropy. So it's central. Thank you. Yes.
So there are some other examples. Before moving forward, let's check a couple of geometries here. I'm gonna zoom in and let's see. Oops, sorry, I changed a couple of things on my screen, but that's fine. All right, now I get it. So, for example, can you see my cursor here?
Yes, I see your red dot. Okay.
So this geometry has a 10-pointed star, which has a perfect phi ratio. It's based on phi. It has golden ratio, and it has pentagon.
That's 10-sided. Very nice. Yes.
And another one, let's say this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is an 8-pointed star, which is an octave-based geometry. Or if we look at here, we can see a hexagonal pattern here. This is also looks like an octave-based geometry, but you know, everything is a matter of perspective. So we know that 6 symmetry axis is the hex view of dodecaicosa, is hex view of tetracube. So how can one get a 6 symmetry axis hex view of dodecaicosa? Maybe it might be a little hard for you to visualize it, but I'm going to give you an example by showing you the Star Mother kit, which is prepared by Dan Winter's formula. So maybe I'll move back a little bit to make it easier. So at the top, we can see a dodecahedron here. And we said that 6 symmetry axis hex view of dodecaicosa. Now here is dodeca. One level inside here, there is icosahedron, these yellow balls. So this is a perfect fractal geometry here. We know that stellated icosahedron is a dodecahedron. So I'm going to show you a perspective of the dodecahedron, and I will lead you to see the 6 symmetry axis as seen as a hex geometry. So later we will talk about the vortex forms, which start from the face going towards the center like a vortex. Now I would like to visualize those wave fields, wave energy movements, starting from the surface going to the center, as in the charge implosive wave collapse. So I'm going to hold this like that, and yeah, now this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3 here. Okay. Now try to visualize this 3 vortexes coming to the center. And I'll show you another 3 here. 4, 5, and 6. If you can succeed in visualizing these 6 cone-shaped vortexes towards the center, then you will see this 6 symmetry axis of a hex view. So what I was trying to say is this is a different perspective of seeing the hexagonal shape.
Theoretically, that tilt angle from the pen to the hex view should approximate 32 degrees, the chin angle of the Sphinx, as we. You sound so much like me sometimes, Tufan. It scares me. It's great.
Thank you. So, all right, some more examples. Yeah, we can play with different geometries here as well, like we did last time, the last slide. Another one. This is another very beautiful fractal architectural example. And this one is the famous Nasir al-Mulk Mosque in Iran. And let's zoom in here again. And here we can see another 10-pointed star or 10-fold rosette here, which is a phi-based geometry. Right above, there's a cubic structure, which is an octave-based. On the walls, we can see another phi-based geometry here, and another, I think this is 12-pointed star and octave-based geometry. So we can find all sorts of different perspectives and geometries in the Islamic symbolism. This one was sent to me by my friend Özge Solak 2 years ago, and this document is from the publication called Turkish Crystallographic Patterns from Ancient to Present. And I'm going to share a link to this document to the chat box here, where you will be able to find all sorts of different tiling, fractal tiling examples. Now, these are mostly from Azerbaijan currently, and these are all fractal tilings. And what else? Okay, so we see fractality in the human body, starting from the left. This is the lymphatic system, blood circulation, lungs, and neurons, all dendritic patterns. Now, there's something interesting with the neurons of the brain. Now, on the right, we see superclusters where huge amounts of star groups come up together and create superclusters, which very much resemble the structure of the neurons. This was first studied by Mark Miller in Brandeis University. They made an interesting finding. They said that the nature of the neurons, structure of neurons, is very much similar to the structure of the universe. And then further scientists did similar research to see whether this is a coincidence or not, and they all came to the same solution, the same result, that this is not a coincidence, but the neurons and the universe is really very similar to each other, and they have the same qualities. Now, that this brings us to the question: is the universe part of a larger mind? And now, again, this has been the core understanding of some esoteric traditions, one of them being Sufism in Islamic culture. Now, there is a concept of the unity of being, which encourages people to look for God inside oneself and perceive the whole universe, including oneself, as the reflection of God. This is quite the fractal definition. According to this philosophy, the universe on the micro level is a holographic model whose source is the energy, just like the neurons in the brain. On a cosmic scale, from the fractal and holographic universe perspective, this means that each part of the world contains the whole of the universe as it's hidden inside each part. Rumi says the purpose of the mind is to see the divine essence and to reach his unity. And Yunus Emre says, knowledge means to know yourself. So in Sufism, the divine secret is the realization of the unity of the God, human, and the universe. The creator and the creation and everything is actually one. It has no beginning and no end. The whole universe and the human being is God's representation in different forms. The universe and the human being is a perception that reflects God's similarity. So before we were talking about the qualities of a fractal pattern, which is self-similarity, repetition, scale, invariant.
That's so beautiful, Tufan, so beautiful. And you may have another slide there, but you know, when Carl Pribram did so much work on the holographic brain idea, and that a hologram contains information about the whole in each part, and that represented perfect charge compression. And perfect charge compression brings up the issue that, you know, all of the plasma universe physicists these days who believe that angels are plasma are saying the universe is dodecahedral and therefore a conjugate structure. So where the mind occurs is where the plasma converges in phase conjugation, self-similarity, or golden ratio, which is true in the neuron as it is in the universe. So we can see how that self-embedding could unpack perfectly. And so the language fits together beautifully. Thank you.
We will talk about the dodecahedron structure of the universe later tonight. So also in Hermetism, in the Emerald Tablet, it says that which is below corresponds to that which is above, and which is above corresponds to that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. So in different esoteric traditions, they are focusing on similar issues. Actually, they are not very different than each other. And I'm glad that the science is catching up the old esoteric understandings. They found that consciousness in the universe is scale invariant and implies an event horizon of the human brain. That's what we were just talking about. So
beautiful.
Consciousness at different scales in the universe are arranged in a way that they embed each other perfectly. Now, I think the critical point here is the way consciousness arrange themselves in the most intelligent way, which leads us to the inevitable truth that most scientists ignore to look at, which is golden ratio perfected phase conjugation creates harmonic inclusiveness, creates perfect charge compression, and thus perfect charge distribution, creates bioactive field and gravity and perception, bliss, etc. So later tonight, we will see why golden ratio progression is the only geometry which supports both adding and multiplying to achieve constructive wave interference. And by doing so, golden ratio phase conjugation optimizes embedding and entanglement as the door to self-organizing systems like consciousness.
These are exactly the words we've been using, and I would just say in that previous slide also that the event horizon of the human brain actually ultimately is the event horizon which is Planck. And when we proved that the Planck event horizon is where it goes superluminal and multi-connected and longitudinal and all that good stuff, we later proved that the Planck event horizon is quantized perfectly to the wavelengths of alpha beta that make the brain waves of bliss. So when their brain waves make alpha beta golden ratio, they scale directly to Planck. So Planck is the real event horizon there, and it does apply to the human brain because brain waves of bliss fit Planck.
Great. So that brings us to concepts like perfect inclusiveness and self-embedding we just talked. So again, let's talk about the basic definition of golden ratio. This is from Dan Winter's original equation. So golden ratio is the fundamental ratio in fractal fields, which is the electric origin, cause, and mechanism of all centripetal and self-organizing forces, including and especially gravity, life force, perception, bliss, entanglement, end of addiction, ADD, alphabet and symbol and color. So basically, if we have a length and we want to divide it in a harmonic way so that each piece after the division has to be harmonic with each other. So if we want to accomplish that, we would need to divide this unit from the exact golden ratio point, which is from the 0.618. So once we do that, the smaller unit to the larger unit is exactly golden mean ratio. And this one to the first length is also exactly golden mean ratio. So there is a harmony in between all the pieces that we divide. So in order to catch that harmony, or to be inclusive harmonically, we need to use golden ratio. And the exponents of golden ratio, so golden ratio is specifically the only ratio which allows a numeric progression to both add and multiply. You can add any 2 in the sequence to get the next number, or you can multiply any number in the sequence by 1.618 and produce the next number. The ability to be at once an arithmetic and geometric progression is only unique to golden ratio. So there is no any other ratio in the universe which can give you this quality. And so the key point I want to emphasize here is coherency. The ratios of the units to each other had to be coherent with each other so that they can create a way to the center non-destructively and with zero electrical resistance. As the mass that we see in the universe from micro to macro arranges themselves likewise. I think that this is not rocket science, and we just need to look at the nature to understand how the planets arrange themselves, how planets, the universe arrange themselves, how super atoms molecularly arrange themselves. Now I will go into details of each one of these items. And this is what we call constructive wave interference, when waves add and multiply constructively with golden mean ratio towards the center, then a constructive wave interference automatically happens.
We've been saying that golden ratio phase conjugation is a climax form of coherence, which in other words would be saying that fractality is a climax perfection of coherence.
Yes. So star geometry has perfect golden ratio in it, and star and the pentagon is one of the most sacred symbols in history. Now, if we divide the red bar to the green bar, we get exact golden mean ratio. If we divide the green bar to the blue bar, again, golden mean ratio, and do it again with the blue and the pink, again, golden mean ratio. So the star symbol has perfect golden mean ratio proportions in it. And we can even continue this further. If we put another star in the pentagon and place another smaller star in the smaller pentagon, then we would go to the center of this field constructively infinitely. So if you look at this length, this is perfect golden mean ratio to this one, and this one has perfect golden mean ratio to this one, and it goes towards infinity. So that's how we reach to implosive charge collapse. This one is from fractal field. When waves add and multiply with the golden mean ratio as seen here, then you create the constructive field, but not the destructive. We will see the difference later.
It's beautiful to see you summarize this, Tufan. Thank you. I would just like to mention that, you know, the theosophic people in Mathematics of the Cosmic Mind had the Greater Maze, which was the Star Mother Kit precedent, and they said all these things about self-similarity, but one thing that they had no clue that this was more than geometry, it was also perfected charge collapse. Namely, it was an electrical insight. They didn't know it had electrical meaning.
Right. I agree. So in our body, there is golden ratio everywhere on our fingers, our ears, and our legs. On our face, of course, not all the faces have exact golden mean ratio, but as the proportions get closer to golden mean ratio, the person becomes more beautiful, because this is the golden mean ratio is the definition of the beauty. And Dan Winter and Patrick both successfully created this nice application where you can measure your brain waves and see the golden mean ratio relationship in the brain. Now, once you get closer to the golden mean ratio, you start to get into this bliss state much easily, and you are more peaceful and happy, and you are able to measure this with this iTribe application. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words here, Dan.
Well, yeah, I mean, literally, you become a charge attractor, and the centripetal electrical force you make with golden ratio in your brain waves is the nature of not just peacefulness and bliss, that charge implosion always precedes charge radiance. So all of the thousands of years of spiritual literature about bliss process and becoming a saint now fits perfectly this physics.
All right. So I think I need to go a little faster, not to miss the end of the class. Okay. Golden ratio in quantum field. Dan Winter has proved that hydrogen radii are exact golden ratio phase conjugate multiples of Planck fitting perfectly to the universal frequency caduceus, which is exactly golden ratio exponents of Planck length and time, origin of all biologic negentropy. Now, repeat after me. Okay.
Thank you.
So we know that golden DNA is golden ratio, and the setup of the golden ratio electrical wave condition allows DNA to become centripetal and electrically negentropic. But of course, there is much more to it, and there's a beautiful video presentation of Dan talking about the purpose of DNA, which is one of my favorites. I would highly advise you to watch this. I'm sure most of the audience here have already watched it at least twice. But yeah, this is a perfect video. He talks about the purpose of DNA for 2 hours. It's a beautiful presentation.
I was a lot younger then. I put the link here for folks. Thank you, sir.
And golden ratio in quantum physics. So researchers, while working on the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, have for the first time observed and measured the signatures of a nanoscale symmetry showing the same attributes as the golden ratio. And it's also being used in nanotechnology because golden ratio is crucial in molecular biology as well. Researchers are working on ways to implement this understanding in molecular nanotechnology.
And in fact, today when we're working on advanced carbon nanotech, we realize you use a phase conjugate dielectric field to precipitate that growth of the carbon nano in the field.
And this one is a dodecahedron plankton. This has been around for 66 million years and survived the KPG mass extinction that resulted in the demise of 76% of species with fossil record, including 90% of calcareous nanofossils. Now, this very much reminds me of what Dan says about what happens after a good fight in an Irish pub. Okay. This one is the tablet of Shamash, the sun god. And the stone tablet was recovered from the ancient Babylonian city of Sippar in southern Iraq in 1881. It is now a major piece in the British Museum's Ancient Middle East collection. Now, this piece has 3 golden ratio rectangles on it. So the first one is this one. This is a golden ratio rectangle. And the second one is this one. And the third one is this one. So I think somebody was into golden ratio.
That's beautiful.
Just to have some fun, I applied a couple of spirals here just to see if there's anything interesting. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Before that, I also want to say that I would like you to focus on the 3 golden ratio rectangles that I just showed you, especially the positions of the golden ratio rectangles, because this spiral comes somewhere around the knee here, but when I applied the same golden ratio rectangles in the same position in a fractal sense here, right here, and added the same spiral starting from top right here, starts from here, comes like this. Now, the funny thing is that, I don't know if this is something serious or not, but the intersection of the golden ratio rectangles intersect right on the eye of the sun god here. And the spiral comes somewhere near the visual cortex. So I don't know if this is anything important to know or not.
And he has a spiral cone hat also.
Right, right. One more thing about this tablet is that we were just talking about this with Dan before the session. Now, the actual measurements are in black, and when we start from the Planck and continue moving forward with Planck times exponents of golden mean ratio, we reach to specific lengths. And John Mitchell discovered that the most sacred length is the English foot. So based on that measurement, I calculated the sacred distance, which is closer to this distance. And that sacred distance have to also develop with the exponents of golden ratio. So the measurements in green are based on the sacred foot, charge resonant phase conjugate, which are explained first by John Michel's and later by Dan Winter's equations independently, which is Planck length times golden ratio exponents of over 164. And there is a very small difference between the sacred measurement and the actual measurement of the tablet, which is somewhere around 1 centimeter. So I don't know if we can account that for the depreciation of the tablet.
It's beautiful that you really understand that it's not just the ratio but also the scale, and if the scaling is embeddable, then we could probably even measure that in the capacitance of the piece.
Right. This one is another tablet. Terry Burns last year posted this on her Facebook account, and I just wanted to give it a check to see if there are any golden mean ratio proportions in this tablet. But this one is originally a Babylonian clay tablet, notable as containing an example of Babylonian mathematics, including trigonometry. Now, we thought that trigonometry was discovered by the ancient Greeks, but this tablet is 1,500 years younger than the Greeks. And voila, the columns have golden mean ratio proportions. There it is.
Wow. Nice.
So yeah, I didn't measure all the tablets. Maybe some don't. By the way, this tablet is a broken tablet as far as I remember. So there must be another remaining of it somewhere probably. And we also see golden ratio in artifacts like Artemis, Zeus, the Selçuk head. By the way, this summer we will be visiting the Temple of Artemis in our conference. And also let me give you some information about the conference as well. So on May 31st, 2018, we are meeting in the ancient Greek city of Smyrna, currently Izmir, Turkey, which has been an important Aegean port in Asia Minor. During the conference, we will be looking into the history of Hermetic mysticism and the techniques used by the forefathers of modern chemistry, herbology, and medicine. We will also look into the deep connections of sacred geometry and alchemy, starting from the ancient times to modern day utilizations, with the help of our distinguished presenters in the magical setting of Smyrna. Oh, and where are we going to do this? Right here. This is the city of Izmir, or Smyrna, and we will be visiting Ephesus right here. Details at alchemicalreunion.com. So some other examples, heads of studies in Nemrut, Mother Goddess. There are a lot of them. Also, golden ratio in sacred lands. Mecca is located in the perfect golden ratio point. Well, you can basically calculate this yourself as well with the ruler of the Google Earth. There's this application where you can measure the distances and just point the North Pole and measure the distance between Mecca and North Pole, and then measure this distance between Mecca and the South Pole and divide them to each other. You'll see that it's 1.618. Now, some researchers say that it also has a golden ratio if you calculate it longitudinally from here, but I don't want to get into that because I don't know where you should take the cut exactly. So it can change from person to person, but if you can measure it from the poles, it is on the perfect golden ratio point. And Fibonacci series. So Fibonacci series are the series that the nature perfects itself towards golden ratio, because the nature works with whole numbers. Because golden ratio is a fractional number, starts with 1.618. So the nature, if the tree gives a branch or a leaf, it needs to either give one or none. So it cannot give 1.618 branch or leaf. So Mother Nature found a beautiful way to express herself numerically. Now, in this series, as we add two numbers to each other, we get the second one in the series. And as we divide them to each other, which I did it here. 1 divided by 1 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 2. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. 5 divided by 3 is 1.666. So as you can see, as you divide the numbers to each other, it perfects itself towards the golden ratio. So let's see a couple of examples quickly. These are the structural, like leaves, the branching. This is a sunflower. Now, there are 34 spirals to one direction clockwise and 21 spirals counterclockwise, which are in line with the Fibonacci series here. And with cauliflower, again, 8 spirals to one direction, 13 spirals to the other direction, also in line with the Fibonacci series. When we look at the pine cones, again, 13 spirals to one direction and 8 spirals to the other direction. I think that this is a good indicative of how plants get voltage from gravity, which has made itself into one of the oldest esoteric symbols. So this is charge distribution efficiency. We'll talk about it later more if we have time. Golden ratio at all scales from micro to macro. In this diagram, Dan Winter has beautifully laid out the key frequency signatures of golden ratio multiples of Planck length and time, which is the perfect phase conjugate negantropic charge collapse, cause of gravity, perception, consciousness, life force, color, all centripetal forces. Here we can see frequency arrangements of critical biological mechanisms like ADP, ATP, photosynthesis, Schumann period of Mother Earth, and periodical movements in the heavens. And Euclid said, the laws of nature are but the mathematical thoughts of God. So this is the golden ratio proof of constructive interference by software emulation. In this diagram, the top side of this white line represents the charge distribution. And the bottom side represents the isolation of charge. And we can see where these fields are maximized. The distribution of charge is maximized at the exact golden mean ratio point, which is 1.618, where the charges distribute themselves efficiently to build a constructive wave interference. As we say, perfect compression creates perfect charge distribution. And at the bottom, the storing of charge or isolation of charge is maximized at 2, which is an octave, multiples of 2. So maximum destructive isolating charge.
What we did, we simply created a heterodyne interference, and as we changed ratio, we graphed how much the interference was constructive versus destructive, very simply.
Yes. And some other examples of measurements here on the left. This one is the biophoton measurements of specific biological materials. And on the right, this is Dr. Krotkov's GDV device. They all measure the same results in specific places, fractality. Also the measurements of seed germination. And now, based on these measurements, we know what kind of materials are good for life. Breathing energy, most fractal. You can see the top side of the list here is charge field serves all life, fractal materials, and on the bottom we can see the materials which are poisons to life. So a fractal field based on golden ratio breeds charge becomes a bioactive field.
That's a perfect summary.
Right. To understand this better, I propose to think as Nikola Tesla suggests. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And moving from here, we need to understand that perfect compression creates perfect charge distribution. But when we say charge, we are still talking about the energy, frequency, and vibration. These are all the same thing. And we have to understand how to create the perfect compression to create perfect charge distribution. This is what we have been talking about. Now, the Nature magazine has said, has shown the cover here, is this the shape of the universe? Now there's a fractal dodecahedron here.
Tufan, if you can hear me, just turn on your
Hi,
camera.
I'm back. Hello.
Yes, sorry, we had a drop there, folks. Tufan, could you just reinitiate your, yes, great.
Yes. Yeah, I just experienced a restart in my computer. I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I was talking. We came to the shape of the universe here, and yeah, the Nature magazine cover is this the shape of the universe, and let's see. Okay, so the scientists did a research on the shape of the universe, and what they did was they mapped the temperature mapping of the space, and then they tried to apply different geometries on that map to see which one fits perfectly. And they tried, as I said, different geometries, and only one geometry fitted perfectly to the map of the universe, and that was a dodecahedron 3D model.
So later we actually want to use that to support the hypothesis that phase conjugation by the dodeca golden ratio is what stabilizes gravity. And we have more physics papers in process on that.
Right. So I will go a little faster because I realize that I have a lot of slides more to show you. So, okay, this is the shape of the universe. And now we know that we are living in a universe where there is polarity. Everything has a minus and the negative and positive forces balance each other. And we also see this in the nature of the cosmos. We see that, or the scientists observe that the clusters of mass or superclusters, they accumulate at specific points in the universe, and specific points are left empty. And until now, they have come up with an unsuccessful explanation with matter and dark matter. But they have failed to find the elusive particles of dark matter since the 80s. Now, they have spent so much money just to find this dark matter particle, but apparently it's nowhere. And I agree with Dan Winter that we should replace the understanding of matter and dark matter with compression and rarefaction. Now, rarefaction is the opposite of compression. It's the absence of compression, where the energy is at its amorphous state. So if we can understand the principles of compression, how wave fields with specific waves, geometries, create what we call mass, then we will understand better the source of gravity and other forces. And we know that there are two opposing forces, centrifugal and centripetal, which is the implosive force when the waves come towards the center, accumulate towards the center. Now, if we can visualize that in a vortex or in a black hole, we will later use this in our models. And this is how phase conjugate implosive collapse happens. Two opposing forces meet at the center point, and we receive, or the life force creates from that specific meeting geometry.
We say where the pine cone's kiss noses perfectly, the pressures converge at the Planck dimension so precisely the way out through the speed of light is enabled longitudinal EMF, which is DNA, radio, and gravity waves. And so it simplifies the whole universe into not just centripetal, centrifugal, compression, rarefaction, but literally is the same thing as yin and yang or plus and minus charge.
Right. Well, we said that golden ratio progression is the only geometry which supports both adding and multiplying to achieve constructive wave interference. And the same principle is being used by nature in phase conjugation to create constructive wave interference. And we talked about these. And this is a nice metaphor to use, the pine cone. This is negantropic charge collapse, pine cones kissing noses.
Thanks for finding that beautiful picture from the old Sumerian for the pine cones. That's great.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to talk about Platonic solids a little bit. Now this one is chemist Moon's work. This is his model of the nucleus. We see a nesting of 4 of the 5 Platonic solids, similar to that conceived by Johannes Kepler to describe the solar system. And so Moon also modeled the atomic world with the understanding of implosive symmetrical fields, as we see in the Platonic solids. So when we look at the Platonic solids, maybe we talked about this last year, we have to visualize that there are vortexes that are coming from the surface towards the center from each direction, where all the waves meet at the center point, as we were talking in the symbolism in Islamic tradition. This one is four-way mixing. This one is a cubic structure. This one is a dodecahedron structure. And I advise you to visualize this meeting of forces when we see the Platonic solids. Now, Platonic solids were first described by Plato in his famous book Timaeus, and he also associated them with specific forces. And we also find them in Scotland, which date around 1000 years before Plato first wrote about them. These are the ritual dodecahedron tools were found in Europe and Asia. Now this one is from Denmark. They put a nice sculpture in the street. So in 1596, Kepler published his first work on the geometry of the universe, Mystery of the Cosmos. And in this work is concerned with the significant ratios of the celestial spheres and the real and proper causes for the number, the size, and the periodical movement of the spheres presented with the help of 5 Platonic solids. Kepler describes the order of the solar system, and in accord with Copernicus, he put the sun into its center, and between the spheres on which planets move, he places 5 Platonic solids. Now I'm going to zoom into the bottom right picture. And this one, I took that one in Prague last year, sorry, 2 years ago, in the Museum of Kepler. Now he describes here how he modeled it. Now this one, the outer sphere, this is the orbit of Saturn, and he places a cube in that sphere, orbit, or the orbit where the Saturn orbits. And inside that cube, he places another sphere which represents Jupiter's orbit. And in it, he places a tetrahedron, and he goes like that with dodecahedron, icosahedron, and octahedron.
And later, the Spirosolaris people have proven that the primary dominant feature of planetary orbitals is golden ratio in general, which perfects that kind of nesting. And ultimately, we will now prove that that same nesting is the cause of stable gravity. So ultimately, we will prove Kepler right.
Right. So in 1619, Kepler published 5 books on the harmonies of the world, and he described an interesting body with 30 faces, which is formed by the intersection of 5 different eternal cubes with identical center. So these are all, I think, was it 32 degree then that you keep the center and rotate the cube 32 degrees and do that 5 times, and you reach to a dodecahedron.
Exactly.
And actually, this is the 4 model representation of the cube. So we think that cube is a 3-dimensional model where there is up and down, forward, backward, right and left. And when you apply an additional rotation with 32 degrees, you reach to the 4th dimensional geometry, which is a dodecahedron.
The 4th axis of spin superposed. Yes.
So this is the energy grid of the world. In the 90s, Russian researchers found the matrix while they were looking for a model to connect the significant locations in history. That matrix had 12 pentagons and inner connections, making it a fractal dodeca-icosa grid symmetry. So it shows like that. And okay, these are electron diffraction patterns, and these are the quasicrystals. And this one on the right is an icosahedral quasicrystal of an aluminium, palladium, manganese. So I would like to play with those.
Those are beautiful.
So I applied a couple of Platonic solids to these electron fields, and as you can see, they fit perfectly to specific Platonic solids, as Moon suggested in his model of the chemistry book. So yeah, we can see a star tetrahedron here, a cube, an octahedron, an octave base square, an icosahedron, and the dodecahedron.
I mean, you know, Moon proved that the nuclear hadron symmetries were Platonic. But if your chemistry teacher in your first chemistry class had said all electron shells are SPDF, and S is a torus, pi is tetracube, and D and F is dodecaecosa, suddenly you'd have seen the whole atomic table as just this nest.
Right, right. And as we went through, I suggest everyone to visualize these forms, these 3D solids, as imploding wave fields, as we see above here. And all of these dots, lights, actually symbolize those wave fields, how the waves arrange themselves around the center. And we can also correlate that with this, the basic divisions of the geometry that were used in Islamic tradition. The 6-point star or hexagon, or an 8-point star, or a 10-point phi-based geometry. And we can also apply these on these electron diffraction patterns here. Now we can basically apply every geometry, like self-similar fractal geometry, to these electron diffraction patterns. So again, when we look at any mass or any atom, there is a source that holds the nucleus together, the protons and neutrons. So we need to understand that source, that power which holds all of them together, the gravitational force, and understand different variations of geometries that bring the wave fields from different symmetries. So these are like artistical representations of forces coming together. Okay, so these are Platonic solids and quasicrystals. Okay, so this one, as I said, the icosahedral quasicrystal of an aluminium, palladium, manganese. I played with it a little bit and applied a couple of geometries here.
And the dodeca nature of palladium is central to lots of conversations about cold fusion, including Jean-Paul Biberia's talk last week.
Yeah. So we can apply all sorts of phi-based geometries in this picture here, as we discussed constructive wave interference, or the perfect phase conjugate implosive collapse. We need to find the right symmetry, golden ratio, to reach to the center. I just played with a couple of drawings here on this diagram. We can also put an icosahedron, because this is actually an icosahedral quasicrystal, but we know that icosahedron and dodecahedron are perfect fractal shapes that create each other constructively. Just like the structure of the universe. So I'm going a bit fast because we don't have much time. And,
yes, in fact, it was Valerie who pointed out to Jean-Paul Biberian that when we held the palladium in his cold fusion laboratory, it actually felt cool in your hand, like it was negentropic. It was self-cooling.
nice. Okay, so going forward, so this was the symmetry that we were using on our conference cover. This is also a phi-based perfect golden ratio charge collapse geometry.
Beautiful, nice slide.
Just like the nature of the universe, as we said. So also the Scientist magazine brought the subject to its cover, Fractal Universe. So we know that the universe is both fractal and dodecahedron, which is also another fractal geometry itself.
It's notable how many physicists these days are speculating fractality as a cause of gravity, but we think we'll be the first to show the mechanism.
Yes. So just to sum up, we talked about compression and rarefaction, and I would like, as I did last year, I want to read an excerpt from Dan's book, Fractal Conjugate Space and Time, Cause of Negentropy, Gravity, and Perception, because this is so fundamental that everybody has to understand the real qualities of the universe, or the qualities of charge, the energy field. So what is negentropy and self-organization in wave systems? Hopefully, most of us agree now that essentially all of physics is a wave function. The illusion that there is such a thing as a particle has clearly been a distraction. The reason we incorrectly imagined the possibility of a particle was due to the way in which waves of charge gathered in packets, because their lengths had to divide evenly into their rotation diameter, what it means to be quantized. In fact, the universe appears to be comprised of a compressible media which stores inertia. I choose to call that universal compressible and fluid-like substance charge, but it is often called ether or chi, or 0 point of vacuum energy, or in more universal parlance, the force be with you, or grace, etc. What is important is to agree on the qualities of the universal fluid more than the name. It is clearly compressible. It clearly behaves like a fluid. It clearly rotates, it clearly stores inertia when it rotates, and in certain geometries, fractal, conjugate, it appears to self-organize and become intelligent and alive. Learning to create that geometry among waves is what this book is about. I love this definition. So as you said,
Tufan.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Tufan. That's exactly the point, yes.
Yes, so the field, the charge we are talking about, has these qualities, which is compressible, behaves like a fluid, stores inertia when it rotates, and in certain geometries, it appears to self-organize and become intelligent and alive. So yeah, we see Platonic solids in nanomaterials. I'm going fast. So this is the Buckminster fluorine, buckyball C60. And Paul in Paul Harris's class, he also talked about the effect of C60 molecule and the longevity. And they realized that scientists were able to increase the lifespan of the rats by 90% with the C60 molecule dissolved in specific materials. And they are also using it in the treatment of HIV virus. It encapsulates the virus. And researchers also found the buckyballs in cold space, and it warps starlight.
I put the link here, fractalfield.com/cold-plasma, of our work on nanomaterials and the phase conjugate nature of the fullerenes. Go ahead. Thank you, Tufan.
This is a cover from Science News. They also brought up the subject about superatoms, and we know that superatoms, they all share this quality of being fractal. Like their nucleus is fractal to their electron shells. This is how the monoatomic gold, cold fusion, and superatoms are organized symmetrically molecularly. And we see the signs of this wisdom in Leonardo da Vinci's art. This is a truncated icosahedron, which is another representation of C60, Buckminster fullerene. We also see the Platonic solids as we went through planktons. We saw that, and yeah, more of Platonic solids. And also, this is the Metatron's cube, and 5 Platonic solids fit perfectly to the Metatron's cube as well. And there is also the E8 symmetry, which all the possible geometries fit in.
The entire subatomic particle zoo is represented in E8 from Garrett-Lisi superdudes unified field theory, which was all based on golden ratio in E8.
Right. So these were from my trip to Italy last year. I just wanted to put them here. Italy, Florence is the birthplace of Renaissance, and they have all sorts of signs of this art and wisdom. We see those Platonic solids used in astronomical measurements here. And okay, so this science, fractal field science, is used in biologic architecture. As we said, perfect compression creates perfect charge distribution. And if you learn how to create the perfect compression, then you can create bioactive villages, basically. This is one of my favorite models. This one is from Michael Rice. This is a molehill building built on phi ratio and with bioarchitecture principles, taking into account the ley lines, using biologic material, and so on. And these are the companies that work with fractal principles, like biologic and based on golden mean ratio. ARCA is from Latin America, and Michael Rice Architect is located in London, and ARC in Czech Republic, I guess, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that would be Ulrich Hausmann. Olda is a fabulous biologic architect of Prague. ARCA is Nina and Arturo in Mexico City, and Michael Rice in, yes.
I both met with Osman and ARCA past year. I haven't met with Michael yet. Hopefully one day. Michael has a very nice project with Sasha Stone, I guess. I think in Africa, they are building, or they built a very nice village.
They're trying. Yes, Michael is now in Slovakia, but still working in Ireland. Has a new website.
All right. And in agriculture, this one is Dan's invention, fractal water, where same fractal principles are used to charge the seeds and have more outcome. And this one is the TeraPhi. TeraPhi is also is based on plasma physics. And Dan, would you like to say a couple of words about TeraPhi?
Just that we use the precise low-frequency cascade predicted by my equation, and then we put that in the phase conjugate noble gas, optically phase conjugate noble gases, and phase conjugated just like the pine cones kissing noses between the two tubes, and we produce a spontaneously gets colder negentropic field in the center, which is rejuvenating and powerful, and it's successful in 20 countries. It's amazing. We're just publishing today a new GDV report, before after TeraPhi. It's beautiful and lots of fun, so people will have that experience.
Great. So, okay, we have a couple of slides left. And this one is biontology. This also works on fractal field physics, because it also includes the algorithm of golden ratio. So this is a therapy that corrects the electromagnetic biophotonic signals that are emitted from the cells of every living being. And we work with, as I said, endocrine problems, chronic infections, and other stuff. It's non-invasive, and we also work with remote treatments as well, successfully. And to tell you in a nutshell, so we have billions of cells in our bodies, and in every cell there are 100,000 chemical reactions in every second. And each one of these chemical reactions, or let me put it this way. If the chemical reactions inside the cell is strong, then the light that is emitted from the cell gets also stronger. If the chemical reactions are weak, then the light of the cell is also weak. And what we do with the treatment is that we amplify the chemical reactions and thus the light that is emitted from the cell. And we do this with the Chiran device. We were talking with Dan Winter before the class, and we basically first take the information from the body and give it back in a biofeedback loop while correcting and amplifying the information. And well, the technology also, or the information is delivered in the light spectrum in a biofeedback loop. So this is also what I do. And I think this is the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you all for coming and listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Tufan, I think it's fabulous that you've assembled the visuals and the concepts so systematically and so beautifully. It's just fabulous, wonderful.
Thank you, Dan.
I think maybe one fun question that was just up here a little bit. Somebody said, well, what causes this to become animated? In other words, when charge converges platonically, what is the moment at which it's animated, comes alive? I thought that was a good question. And I think, we're hypothesizing here that when plasma donuts converge recursively, optimized by golden ratio conjugate to Planck, they become self-organizing and they communicate at center, longitudinally embedded through the speed of light at the Planck dimension. And that's why ball lightning plasma donuts respond so well to telepathy. They're animated, and elementals, and on a larger scale, angels are the same physics, and ultimately your aura. That's animation is literally animus, the soul.
So Chad is asking, what are the main differences electrically and spiritually between odd numbered and even numbered geometric formations? I think when we talk about geometry, we always see it from a two-dimensional view. Let's say we look at a picture or a tiling or a page, we see two dimensions. So we would also need to know what kind of a three-dimensional model it represents. So maybe it's a little bit more than that, more than it is odd number or even number, but maybe we should go deeper and try to understand what kind of a 3D model or even what kind of a 4D model they represent. And yeah, it's a nice question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit simplistic to say that constructive or destructive interference is really the issue. And of course, we know that octaves powers of 2, which is a very even number, produces max destructive interference, whereas pent golden ratio, which are obviously start with odd numbers, are max constructive interference. But it's not the fact that it's an odd or an even number, but it's the fact that the 3D symmetry of those waves either interfere constructively or destructively. Implosively, in pent symmetry, and charge isolation, which is stability in hex and cubic symmetry octaves.
Okay, thank you all, and you are welcome for your nice comments.
Yes, Shelley saying how much she enjoyed it, Tufan. Really, your visuals are fabulous, and your summary is fabulous, Tufan. Really, very helpful.
Thank you, Dan. I really enjoy doing this and presenting this with you, and I hope that this makes things a little clearer just for the people who doesn't know the electrical engineering language extensively.
And the fact that you've connected it so beautifully to Eastern and Western, to Muslim spiritual tradition, showing that there's a beautiful physics behind this, is a unifying idea and helps heal the tension between cultures when they see that the physics unifies all of us. It's a beautiful thing. We thank you again.
Yeah, I talked about this slide, which is on the other upload. I don't want to go back to it now because I need to upload it, but maybe I can upload it easily right here. Let's go back to that. So yeah, we were talking about Plato and saying that geometry will draw the soul towards truth and create the spirit of philosophy. And I was hoping to create some understanding about this statement, and I hope that we have accomplished that and that it makes more sense now.
It's beautiful. You know, we have hypothesized that the spark gap of the hydrogen bond, which we now know is fractal recursive and conjugate, which is the center of every DNA ladder rung, and every ladder rung codon in your DNA is pent, hex, golden ratio, rectangle. And so suddenly if you meditate on that and you see it spiral and helically embed shortwave braided on long by a coherent power of love, suddenly you're meditating on the physics of what causes the implosive wormhole called a soul right in your own DNA. It's a big tornado nesting and nesting. And so it's about meditating on geometry that reveals to you how that's working. And it's a cause of bliss in itself to meditate on the geometry of your own DNA. So I think, yes, you know, the geometry of DNA is a great way just to meditate on how to draw the soul truth toward you. And that's right. Our DNA manifesto article.
I was talking with Dan before the class, and I was telling him that so I got this Star Mother kit last year, and I was telling him how just observing this model changed the state of my dreams. It's like after I put up this model and started observing that, I realized that every morning I wake up with a full satisfaction feeling. Even though I did not remember any particular dream, but the feeling was so satisfying that it just made my day every day. And then I started questioning, and I realized that those days I was just observing the Star Mother kid, trying to see it from different perspectives, trying to see inside. I was just meditating on it. I wasn't doing something serious, but apparently it affected my subconscious. And the geometry itself is really, I feel like it's drawing the soul towards the truth, as Plato said, and it's creating this immense awakening inside. So I really,
precisely that.
I
That's
really,
a seed of implosion.
yes,
Very nice, brilliant. And we would encourage everyone to notice that if you plant the seeds of implosion in the visualization in your dreams, and the Star Mother Kit is one way, that it will accelerate as you get to that center point where you achieve communion and fusion. It's wonderful that you're coherent enough in your dreaming, Tufan, to notice that. Good work.
yes, I'm very glad to be trying, seeing, experiencing, and sharing this.
So with that note, I think we'll say thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Tufan.
Thank you.
Blessings, everybody. Stay tuned. Next week, the conversation will be about hygiene. And Tufan, we will put this video up in just probably within a day. And I'm sure this will be one of our most popular films. We thank you again, sir. Blessings.
Great. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
Sending love around the world. Blessings, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.